Hello and welcome back to Leader Up, a podcast of Army Management Staff College. Leader Up is a professional leadership conversation where we discuss a broad range of leadership and leader development topics with an emphasis on the Army civilian profession. I'm your host, David Howie. In today's episode, we have a guest that I know our Leader Up audience will be excited to hear from. Mr. Michael Formica is the Combined Arms Center Deputy to the Commanding General, and he's joining us today to talk about leadership and leader development. So, Mr. Formica, thank you so much for being with us today on Leader Up.
David, it is a true pleasure, and I look forward to the conversation we're going to have. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. And so let me just jump right in and ask you a little bit about so our audience will know kind of who you are and what you've done to get you to this point. So just tell us a little bit about, number one, your background, and then also your current job as the Deputy to the Commanding General here at the Combined Arms Center.
Well, thanks, David. And so I'm proud to say I have been an Army professional for over 37 years, 27 of that in uniform, and then 10 years as a senior executive as a member of the Army. I entered service right out of university, was a combat arms officer, as I mentioned, for 27 years. My last assignment was at Training and Doctrine Command. I spent a year doing other things after I retired, and then I had an opportunity to compete to become an SES in the United States Army, and my first assignment was as the Deputy G3 at TRADOC. I did that for over 4 years. And then I had the opportunity and the privilege to become the MCOM Europe Director, a leadership position for which about 6,500 Army professionals, both appropriated fund and non-appropriated fund, and local nationals were part of the great MCOM Europe team. And most recently, I arrived here about a year ago to become the Deputy to the Commanding General of the Combined Arms Center. And the Combined Arms Center, while located at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, really is a global activity. All of the Army's centers of excellence, which are 2-star billets associated principally with warfighting functions and responsible for the providing professional military education to our uniformed professionals, our soldiers, are located across the United States. And then we have outreach capabilities inside of the various Army service component commands around the world as well. The Combined Arms Center, as I mentioned, professional military education for soldiers and also for our Army Civilian Corps. And the keystone activity associated with that is the Army Management Staff College. And as the senior civilian inside of Training and Doctrine Command and the Combined Arms Center, I have a vested interest in the professional development of the civilian cohort of our Army. And so that's one of the key things I do as the Deputy to the Commanding General here at Combined Arms Center.
And so if we think back to those many, many years ago when you were first came into the Army, if you could think back how you have seen over those many years the role of the Army civilian, how has that role changed? How are Army civilians different today than they were 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And first of all, I think it's important to note that the Army civilian is a member of the Army profession. Okay. And that was a conscious decision made in 2010 by then General Dempsey, the commander of TRADOC, as the Army established the Army profession and the Army's professional ethic. Conscious decision to recognize that the over 275,000 civilian strong cohort needed to be part of that profession. And that was a clear, in my mind, milestone in the Army's recognition of the criticality of the civilian inside of the 1.2 man 2 million man active component, reserve component, and then you add the 275,000. So almost, 1.5 million Americans serving in uniform and out make up the Army profession, and we became part of it then, which recognized not just the technical skills, the touch labor, the administrative skills that often were associated with civilians, and perhaps 35 years ago was my perspective of what the Army civilian did inside the Army, but clearly recognized the essentiality of the leadership and the technical requirements that the Army civilian brings to the Army. And from that point on, and first of all, my optics became associated as a civilian. That's about the time I entered as an SES. It became clear to me that the dependency upon the civilian and including us in the profession was intended to enable the Army to put soldiers into positions that were uniquely soldier skills. We were a nation at wartime. We were surging forces to be able to operate in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as other forward locations. And it was important that if there was any opportunity to free a space from a soldier and backfill it with a capable, qualified, and well-trained leader as a civilian, we did so. So that's kind of why we are where we are. And over time, I think our Army appreciated the great capability that the civilian corps could bring, and then recognized if we wanted to improve that, sustain that, continue to move that forward, then we ought to include us in the Army profession. Over.
And that kind of leads me right into my next question, which is about professional development, because on the military side, professional development has been emphasized heavily for many, many, many years, and the Army Civilian Corps is also now very interested in developing themselves as part of the Army profession. So I just want to hear your thoughts about why civilian professional development is so important for us as part of the Army Civilian Corps.
Yeah. So if you, as you said, you segue from my last response, which was you are now part of the profession and you are valued members of the team. And we, the Army, recognize the essentiality of the many activities and functions and missions that we ask you to perform. Then as part of the profession, there are three subparts: character, competence, and commitment. We need to make sure that we are developing you and you develop yourself to be a professional of character, a professional of competence, and a professional who is committed to the service of our nation. And professional military education really touches on every one of those attributes that we expect of an Army professional. We inculcate throughout the various levels of professional military education, and we're talking education now. We're not talking training. We're not talking technical skills improvement necessarily, but we're talking education. So we want to make sure that our Army civilian appreciates the criticality of being an individual of character in this Army, because character and all that goes into the Army values of loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage are expected of soldiers, and the civilian must maintain those same values to be able to be respected by the soldier counterpart. We do that in professional military education. We imbue that in our junior leaders, and then we ensure it remains consistent and present in our leaders as they advance, and as important, that they are imbuing that in their subordinates. The competence piece is making sure that those leadership competencies that we have defined for our Army, which are present in our Army regulations, are taught to our civilian professionals. And again, that's what we do inside of the professional military education aspect in the various levels at the Army Management Staff College. Absent that, it's very hard for an individual to continue to grow as a leader, to appreciate where his or her strengths and perhaps areas for improvement are, to be able to better develop themselves. And again, as important, see their subordinates through that same lens so that they're able to develop them. And then lastly, I think professional military education becomes a touchstone for a professional to go back to remain committed to service and committed to the United States Army as a critical part of our nation's defense and frankly, the fabric of our nation. And so professional military education allows us to take that civilian core, which is such an important part of our Army's fabric, to first of all, be individuals of character, to recognize the competent skills they have and what need to be developed, and then to be committed and to inspire others to be committed to the profession as well.
And last fall, I read this document that is called the Army's People Strategy, and I'm just curious to hear your viewpoints about that document and how that's related to professional development in the Army Civilian Corps.
Yeah, so the Army People Strategy really is it is what it says. It's a strategy, and it is focusing the resources and the efforts of our Army to specific outcomes associated with both the soldier side as well as the civilian side. And I'm proud to say that we have a civilian implementation plan that works across a variety of lines of effort, from how we acquire or assess individuals into the civilian corps, to how we develop them in the civilian corps, and then how we employ them or ensure that their efforts are best suited for the activities that we need them to be able to perform. And then lastly, how we retain them in the Army in that service after, we have brought them on board, developed them, and we want to make sure that we are retaining that talent, those civilians inside of our Corps. Really seminal document. It's the first time the Army has taken a look at the civilian Corps through the lens of how we build a strategy across lines of effort with major objectives and milestones to be able to do the four things that I outlined there. And again, I'm really proud of where the Army has taken this to this point. The plan is on the street. It was approved, and we are working hard to take what is on paper and make it reality across the Army.
And let's talk about our organization, the Combined Arms Center, that you're a part of, and I'm also a part of that. These initiatives that the Army is trying to do to improve civilian development, specifically supervisor development, what are some of those things that the Army's doing, and what is our organization, the Combined Arms Center, what is our role in making those things happen?
Yeah, so let me just link a couple things together here that I've been talking about. So 2010, the Army says the civilian corps is part of the profession. 2019, 2020, the Army says, okay, let's have a strategy that enables our Army Civilian Corps to perform to the best degree possible in support of that Army profession, that we acquire the right people, that we develop those people, that we leverage their talents, and that we retain them. And then we, TRADOC, and specifically CAC, is the lead integrator for that line of effort which is developed, which is exactly in our wheelhouse, right? And we see this as a great opportunity to, first of all, as you mentioned, ensure that new supervisors are fully aware of all of the Office of Personnel Management requirements, that that lead to a workplace service inside of the profession by our Army professionals that is exactly the kind of environment that people will thrive in. It is inspirational. It is free of hostile work environment activities, all those kinds of things. We want to make sure those conditions are set, and that is part of supervisory development. And there are specific tasks. I want to say over 150 skills and knowledge tasks that individuals that are for first time going to be supervisors need to really appreciate. And we have gone from, or are going from, an online course to do that to really a hybrid of online training, face-to-face training with the local civilian personnel offices to instruction that is nested inside of our various levels of professional military education to reinforce that. So over about a year's time, an individual that has first become a supervisor at the end of that time will have a solid appreciation beyond, man against computer, PowerPoint slide deep, but a solid appreciation of what it means to be a supervisor and to be a leader of civilians. So really, really significant progress made there. And we'll start seeing that in the second and third quarter of fiscal year 21, when those activities that we've been working on manifest themselves in an improved online course. The civilian personnel agencies on the installations have their face-to-face training in hand, and we've inculcated or nested all that with what we do in the basic, intermediate, and advanced courses as part of the Army Management Staff College. I think it's important to note that this isn't just for civilian supervisors, that the military supervisors are required to participate in this training as well. And I use the word required very specifically because this is not what would be nice if you did it. It is absolutely critical that we get to a point in our Army in which leaders are being held accountable for the completion of these tasks by supervisors, so that we can, again, provide for a work environment that is consistent with the policies and regulations of our government in terms of really leveraging and nurturing the capabilities of our Army professionals that are civilians.
And you just talked a little bit about my organization, Army Management Staff College, and I would just like to ask you if you can elaborate on how you see our role, Army Management Staff College's role, in the future professional development of civilians, kind of what it is now, and then maybe how you see an organization like Army Management Staff College in the future.
Yeah, so first of all, as I mentioned earlier, I think the Army Management Staff College is, pick the metaphor, keystone, cornerstone of this activity. It is absolutely essential that this organization continue in the manner that it has, and in the process develop perhaps different means to deliver the education across the world to the 275,000 plus Army civilians inside the Army Civilian Corps. When I arrived here a year ago, I did not have a full appreciation of the amount of effort and the quality of the product that comes out of an individual that attends the basic, the intermediate, and advanced courses, as well as what is called the CECL program, or the Continuing Education for Senior Leaders. So I went down to AMSC and I said, I need you guys to lay this out for me. Tell me, what you did to develop the programs of instruction for the various coursework and the courses that we perform for our Army. And after about 2 hours, I was really amazed at the linkages between the leadership competencies our Army has defined for both soldiers and civilians, and how that had been built into those programs of instruction. And then how it was reinforced throughout the various levels of, the educational tiers towards acquisition of knowledge. I'm not an expert. I'm not even a novice, but Bloom's taxonomy is the means in which you track to what degree your education is achieving the outcomes for adults, right? And the way these programs of instruction were developed, we are able to achieve the highest level inside of that taxonomy through resident face-to-face education. The challenge that we have faced, and we have faced this, frankly, for the last dozen or more years, is that while we have this great capability and we have sufficient capacity, we have not been able to draw enough attendance to be able to receive this professional military education. Now, our Army specifies that as a supervisor, and it depends upon at what grade you're a supervisor, whether it's at the 11, 12, 13, 14, or 9 to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you're supposed to receive this educational training. The corollary is what we do for the Officer Corps and the NCO Corps, that by rank, there is specific professional military education that you're supposed to receive. Unfortunately, we have not been able to see the kind of attendance that would ensure that every supervisor inside of those bands of grades has received this education. And the challenge is that in many cases, we've lost opportunities. And in some cases, that lack of leader development leads to a work environment for which Army professionals are not inspired and perhaps not performing to the greatest extent they want to or are able to. Okay. And we often see this in federal employment viewpoint surveys in which, there tends to be criticism about those kinds of things inside of our organizations across the Army. So how do we address that? And over the last year plus, the Army Management Staff College has been working very hard on a couple of activities, one of which was induced based upon the coronavirus, and the other preceded it, and for which we hope to be able to leverage more fully here in the future. The first that we had been working on before COVID was this concept of taking the education to 3 or 4 places across the nation versus having folks come to here, really to reduce the challenge it is for Army civilians and for the organizations they come from to be able to send them all the way out to Fort Leavenworth for 2, 3, or 4 weeks at a time, depending upon the class. So we call that mobile education teams at satellite locations: Belvoir, Aberdeen, Redstone, San Antonio, Texas, as an example, in which if you're in a region there, you would travel to that location to receive the instruction. The mobile education team, that's a concept that we want to really transition to. All right. Now, the second thing driven by COVID was a virtual means of delivering education. And we were forced into that, like much of the professional military education, to include the Command General Staff College. And hats off to the AMSC team and to Army University. They converted curriculum to that. That said, we are in the process now, having executed those, to really determine to what degree that, the terminal learning outcomes and objectives that we aspire to from a course are able to be achieved by that modality of education. Our initial sense is if there are 6 levels in this Bloom's taxonomy, we can get to about 4 through the best virtual education means possible. The last 2 are perhaps problematic. So what we think for the future, what the future might look like. The future might be a hybrid, and this is what I've challenged the AMSC team to do, a hybrid between virtual for portions of the course and then limited mobile education teams at these satellite locations. So we do a couple things. We reduce the amount of time that an Army civilian is away from his or her home, and many times that is a challenge given the composition of our workforce, and also reduce the amount of time perhaps that an Army civilian is away from his or her duty position. Let me build on that last point just for a moment. Why is it different for a soldier versus an Army civilian? Well, for our soldiers, recognizing the criticality of unit readiness, there is already an account built that really puts X number of soldiers in our Army into this account simply for training, education, and for hospitalization. It's called the TTHS account. No such account exists for the Army Civilian Corps. So when Formica steps out of his job to attend some long-term educational activity, it's at the expense of his organization, seat unfilled, next person covers for kind of thing. So we recognize that challenge, and that's why we're looking for a hybrid solution that perhaps will address both the personal family issues associated with civilian corps as well as the organizational advantage. All of this focused on making sure that by about 2029 or so, every civilian at those, for lack of a better term, pay bands I described, that is a supervisor, will have attended this course. Okay, the appropriate course, be it the basic, the intermediate, or the advanced course, because we are absolutely confident that we have a great program of instruction. And if we can increase attendance, that the environment that our leaders lead in will improve, and the retention of these critical individuals for which we've invested money in acquiring and developing and leveraging their skills in service to our nation, they will want to continue to serve more. So that's a long answer to a short question, but the criticality of AMSC, I hope, is evident inside of that. Over.
That's very helpful, and I'm sure our Leader Up audience out there is very interested to hear that your views about how we can increase attendance in our CES courses. So thank you for that insight and those responses. I want to ask you, Mr. Formica, about a little bit more about you personally, about your journey to becoming an SES, and maybe if you could just talk about the important milestones or the choices that you've made over the past 10 years that helped you get to where you are today in your career as an SES.
David, thanks. And so I'm gonna answer the question perhaps a little bit differently than you expected. Okay, and so for 10 years I have been an SES, and for 10 years I have been a coach and a mentor for a number of Army civilians who aspire to either become a GS-14, a 15, or an SES. And I arrived at becoming an SES through, frankly, the benefits of having been a soldier and an officer in the United States Army that had gave me every opportunity for broadening assignments, provided me with a regimented education system that developed my skills to be able to operate in a variety of assignments. And that led to me being able to, command at the highest level as a colonel in the United States Army at a brigade combat team level. And so I was well prepared to become a senior executive in the Army through those activities. And so that is not a good corollary. What I say to all the individuals that I coach and mentor is, how do we take you as a true blue civilian? Okay. The individual that starts at a GS, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, and has worked their way up to become a GS-11 or a GS-12 or 13, and has aspirations and has all of the capability and the competencies to be an SES. What do we need to do to make you as competitive as and as prepared for as, the colonel that just retired? Okay. That's what we got to do. And frankly, it starts before 11. And that's what I'm trying to build into the, to the fabric of the Army Civilian Corps with develop. At the earliest times, at the 7 or 9, when we bring you to the basic course, you've got to recognize the need for developmental assignments and seek those out and have those conversations with your supervisor. Okay, you need to recognize the educational opportunities that you need to seek out for the Army to resource, or perhaps you work on your own to acquire, be it an advanced degree or some other professional certification or credential. Okay, and then lastly, you got to be mobile. You've got to recognize that inside of the office area or the function that you currently work, your opportunities for advancement may be limited, and more importantly, your ability to recognize and build yourself to be an enterprise leader may be limited as well. And so, my thought for aspiring civilians that at one point want to become SESs is you've got to seek broadening assignments that take you out of your comfort zone, enable you to have a greater appreciation of how the enterprise operates. So if you don't understand financial management, you want to work inside of an RM shop somewhere inside your organization. If you don't understand ops and plans, then you need to work inside of that kind of outfit inside of your organization. If you don't understand how the front office works and what senior leaders think and how they approach life every day, then you want to seek out an opportunity to be an executive assistant for a senior leader to be able to do it as the example. Okay. And you got to recognize that, you may have to be mobile outside of the geographical area that you grew up in or you're serving in to be able to do that. So, that's how I coach, and also mentor, Army civilians that aspire to be SES. My own awareness as an SES the Department of Defense has tiers. Tier 1 equivalent of a 1-star SES, Tier 2 equivalent of a 2-star, Tier 3 equivalent of a 3-star. The Department of the Army's approach has been, you work at a tier until you've demonstrated the capability for either advancement or a lateral to broaden your understanding for future advancement. Okay. And you should be mobile as well in doing that. And what I have learned in my 10 years and 3 assignments inside that 10 years, first Deputy G3 Trade Hawk, Director IMCOM Europe, and now the Deputy to the Commanding General CAC is, that I did not have, as I entered a Tier 1, a full appreciation of the Army enterprise. I did not have, as I entered as a Tier 1, a full appreciation of senior leadership at the enterprise level. And through the developmental opportunities and the educational opportunities that our Army provides SESs, I gained those. And so at about the time in TRADOC that I was like, I got this. I understand. The next day won't be a surprise. And about that time, the Army said, yep, I think it's probably about ready for you to do something next, and let's challenge you. And that's when I got to go to Europe and do something I had never understood before, installation management, and what it took as a leader inside of, that kind of organization to be able to lead up and out in the enterprise and down and in with the great civilians that made up the Installation Management Command in Europe. So there's continuous growth at every stage, and you have to be prepared for those broadening assignments. You should seek them out, and you should, as need be mobile to be able to serve inside them. Over.
Thank you for that response, and I'm sure that we have some folks out in our Leader Up audience that will really appreciate that kind of career advice. And my last question that I'd like to ask you is about IMCOM, Installation Management Command, and specifically, if you just think back on when the Army adopted the installation management philosophy that it has now, 15, 16, 17, 18, almost 20 years ago, when Installation Management Agency, now IMCOM, stood up, and you were the director of IMCOM Europe. How has IMCOM, the presence of IMCOM, changed, affected, made more important the role of the Army civilians within the profession of arms?
Yeah. So this sort of takes us back to the point in the conversation where, our Army recognized the need for soldiers to be in tactical units to perform the tasks of the Army profession that only they can perform, which generally is the closing with and destroying the enemies of our nation, and recognized that there was an opportunity inside of the then installation management activity to convert many of the positions inside of the garrisons. And at that point, I believe they were called area support groups, into civilian positions. And it is just a great example of how the civilian corps was asked to step up, lead up, to become the leaders of the various subordinate organizations inside of a garrison. So from what used to be, a lieutenant colonel or major, perhaps branch immaterial, perhaps an engineer, became the purview of a Army civilian. Okay, to become the DPW of a garrison, to become the director of FMWR, to become the director of the DPTMS, those kinds of things. And so at the grade of GS 13 or 14, we transitioned from majors and lieutenant colonels to GS 13s and 14s. And we expected, and what I saw firsthand, witnessed exceptional leadership by a civilian corps that was capable of performing those tasks. And that enabled our Army, which had a ceiling of the end strength for the active Army of whatever the number was at the year, to be able to focus those soldiers on those tasks that only soldiers can do, and which circles right back to sustain the installations of the Army, to go from generation to generation of Army civilian being able to continue to accomplish that task, the essentiality of professional military education, as well as the technical development and technical skills associated with the career programs and the various other career fields that our Army civilians are in, has to be sustained, has to be focused on for the installation management enterprise to be effective. And again, after over 4 years of service in Europe, working with 7 wonderful garrisons that were in direct support of the Army Service Component Command of the United States Army Europe, as well as EUCOM, AFRICOM, and the other joint players inside of the European theater, I could not have been more proud of what our civilian corps looked like 15 or 20 years after that transition occurred, to be able to free the military members to be, in the formations that are assuring our allies and deterring the Russian threat that exists there currently. So it works, and our Army took a chance, and it's our job as the Army Civilian Corps to make it better. And that goes with everything we've been talking about, from supervisory development programs to the professional military education that we need to ensure we have greater attendance to as we move forward.
And so, Mr. Formica, I want to thank you for your time. And I know you're a busy man, so thank you for taking time out to speak with our Leader Up audience today. Is there anything else that the folks that are listening that they need to hear from you that I haven't asked you about?
Yeah, no. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share some of these thoughts. And I want to really end about where I started a bit ago here. And that is, a conscious decision was made by senior uniformed leadership to include us, the Army Civilian Corps, in the Army profession. We have demonstrated our capacity to perform in those roles, and it's up to us to, on a daily basis, live up to that and to challenge those that are inside of our organizations to live up to that, and to inspire them that what we do is not a job. We are not, working for the Army. We really are in the Army, and I care to say that the Army professionals inside of the Army Civilian Corps probably walk home every night or drive home every night with a bit of angst about whether they have enough resources to perform the tasks, whether they have the right skill sets inside of their organizations to perform the tasks. And that's a good thing. That means that you are committed to this Army as service versus a job versus a paycheck. And we, the Army, and you, members of this part of the Army profession, the Civilian Corps, we need to constantly seek ways to fill those gaps or find ways to mitigate them so that we can continue the great tradition of the United States Army. So thanks again, David, for giving me the opportunity to talk with you guys today.
All right. Thank you. And thank you again from all of our Leader Up audience out there to you, Mr. Formica, for stopping by and talking with us today. And this is your host, David Howie, saying farewell. And please make sure to join us again next time for another edition of Leader Up.
As always, if you have any questions or feedback or would like to learn more about our podcast, please check the description for our email and for our website. Thanks for listening.